and welcome to today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm your hostess, Michelle Graves, affectionately known throughout the United States and internationally for over 40 years now, and if you can believe that, as the Money Lady. And today's show is no exception. In fact, I'm delighted to be able to have this remarkable man as my guest for the next hour. So please have a seat because you're going to learn some things, because you know my commitment is to education and empowerment of my viewers. Today's guest is Commandant Robert Bernard Middleton II, and he is the president of the Montford Point Marines, headquartered in Detroit, Michigan. He is coming to us today by Zoom, and he will be sharing with us the history of this remarkable organization, as well as their upcoming event to honor these men, including a commendation. So again, without further ado, I'm going to get right into the meat of this interview with Commandant Middleton II to talk to him about the Montford Point Marines. You may not even be aware, and many of us are not, but the prayer I have is that through this television venue, we will be able to learn some things about this organization and about him and encourage you to go deeper. So, good morning, Commandant.
Good morning, Apostle. How are you this morning?
I am doing extraordinary and excellent, and I'm so delighted to be able to have you on, given your very, very intense schedule, providing the leadership and direction of this remarkable organization. So I thank you for carving out time to do this television show. Let's begin by you telling me about this organization. Let's look at the history of this organization, if you would mind expounding.
Well, I thought you might want to know a little about me first.
That's perfect. I would
And
love to
then,
know that too.
can we do that?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well, our organization, the Montford Point Marines of America, is a nonprofit 501c3, and our mission is to preserve the history of the nation's first Black African American Marines of World War II. And prior to that time, there were no Black Marines. So it is strictly an honor and a privilege to have the oversight of this organization. It's one of the most distinguished veteran military organizations in the United States. I also chair the annual Veterans Day observance ceremony at the historic Elmwood Cemetery, and I have some other positions that I also hold in the local community, including treasurer and CFO of the National Veteran Business Development Council, which is the largest non-governmental third-party business certification entity in the United States. I'm also vice president of the Broadhead Association, which is a community development corporation for the veterans community. And so we're seeking to do a $40 million development that will eventually house the Montford Point Marines Museum.
That is remarkable. How do you have time to juggle all of these things? That's a lot.
Well, I missed my calling. I should have been a juggler in the circus, but God enables me to do everything I do. I could not do it otherwise.
So you yourself are a Marine?
Yes, I was formerly a non-commissioned officer in the military from 1967 to 1972, and a decorated combat veteran in the Republic of Vietnam, Southeast Asia, between 68 and 69.
That was a tough war.
All wars are tough and ugly.
You said it concisely. All wars are tough and ugly, and certainly the Marines have a proud history of combat in areas that other branches typically are not taking the lead on. Is that a particularly accurate statement?
I would say so. I would say so. If you're in the United States Marine Corps, you have a 95% probability that you will serve on the front lines.
My goodness.
Yes, in the
My
area of
goodness.
operations, in combat operations, yeah.
So this is what you did. So how did you get involved with the Montford Point Marines organization?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that question because I remember that some years ago, a gentleman who was another Marine as myself began talking and asked me, did I ever hear the history of America's first Black Marines? I said, well, no, I haven't. And that's been over 20 years ago now. But I did not get involved really with the organization until a few years later, where I started off in positions like, judge advocate and secretary and national secretary, bylaws committee, and it just grew on. And so eventually I became the commandant of the Montford Point organization.
And tell me, how long have you been in that position?
That's been, I would say, about 14 years without telling my age.
Well, it's okay. You carry your age very well. You
Well,
do.
glory to God.
Yes.
We try to.
So in the 14 years that you have been at the helm of this organization, are you comfortable in telling me how you all are doing organizationally?
Organizationally, it has been a struggle since COVID. During the COVID situation, we did lose some members to the disease. Meetings were not as attended as well as they usually did. So it did impact us in terms of membership. And, so we are now recovering and recuperating nicely at this time.
So do you have any of the original Montford Point Marines alive and in your organization?
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad that you asked that. Sadly enough, we have lost most of our Montford Point Marines who were original World War II. And remaining with us is 100-year-old centenarian Marine Butler Martin. He's an original World War II Montford Point Marine. So he is probably one of only about 300 or less remaining in the United States.
Out of what was the original?
Out of the original. Mm-hmm.
And how many were in the original?
Originally, there were about 20,000 Black Marines that were recruited and trained at a segregated military base named Camp Montford Point, New River, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
So that Camp Lejeune that is white had a subdivision that was the Montford Point group? Is that how that worked?
Yeah, well, it certainly did, yeah. The original Montford Point Marines, once they were recruited, they were sent to a segregated part of Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. It wasn't even a base, actually. They were dropped off in a wooded area without, running water, without housing accommodations. They had to build their own. And they were dropped literally out off in the woods with the dangerous snakes and insects and other animals. So had they in fact became injured medically and required hospitalization, there would have been no hospital that would have treated them for their injuries.
And yet they were under the covering of the Marine Corps,
Yes,
and they had no health accommodations in
no
this.
ma'am, no ma'am, not
That's
really.
that's dreadful.
Hmm.
That is dreadful. How were they recruited?
Well, in 1941, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, uh, because of pressure from political activists such as his own wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, and her good friend, close friend and confidant, Mary McLeod Bethune, and A. Philip Randolph, who was the president of um, the Porters Union, brought pressure on FDR to desegregate and end discrimination in the defense industry. And that resulted in him passing an executive order called Executive Order 8802. And that order ended and abolished discrimination in the defense industry, which in fact opened the doors for Black Marines to join the Marine Corps that had been pretty much without any men of color in its ranks for 167 years.
167 years?
Yes, since the founding of
Commandant,
the nation. And
Commandant,
yes,
you,
that's correct, ma'am.
okay. I
There
just
were
needed,
under George Washington, under General George Washington, there were Black Continental Marines. There were a handful, maybe 3 or 4. And due to the pressure, political pressure from in this during that era, and the Jim Crow laws that were enacted, he was compelled to not permit men of color to serve within its ranks. And that lasted for 167 years through 1942.
my words. I can only imagine the pressure that this president experienced to
Oh,
bring, I can't even imagine politically what he experienced. But he did put this law into motion.
yeah. And, he wasn't really a happy camper, but he had to do it because of the political pressure that was being brought upon him in Washington, D.C. by protests and so forth. He could not have, uh, protests like that during wartime. It would be such a distraction, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hmm.
So he signed this executive order to put this particular division into place where they could now have African descent men in the Marine Corps. Is that correct, or was this for
That
all
that
branch?
that's correct. However, they could not serve and train with white recruits or white Marines. They
So
had to be
they,
separated, and that's where the name Camp Montford Point came into play because it was a segregated base for blacks only. It was the only place like that in the United States. All black Marines, regardless of where they were from in the United States, had to train at the segregated base.
now
Camp.
were there higher ups? Were these Caucasian men that were training them?
Well, at first there were, and they slowly, evolved into eventually some black men, taking charge over them.
Mm-hmm.
But initially, you can imagine that uh, they were despised and rejected, and many of the rank and file uh, did not were not necessarily in agreement with blacks coming into the Marine Corps. In fact, made statements like one general named General Holcomb made a statement that he would rather have 250,000 whites being Marines than 5,000 blacks. He didn't feel that Marines would make good fighters. And So uh, that was his statement, and that impacted, of course,
The morale.
the morale, of course. Uh-huh.
Oh my
But
God.
they were, very adamant. They were very dedicated, committed to what they had. They knew that they were, being a part of history at that time, and they were steadfast in terms of making that come about.
Well, there were 20,000, if I understand that number, of African descent men who were a part of the Montford Point Marines.
Yes,
That's a
started
lot
out.
of men.
About 20,000.
That's a
Between
lot of
that,
men.
20,000 is between 1942 and 1949.
Okay, during that period.
Right. President Truman passed another executive order in 1949 to desegregate the Marine Corps and integrate
Period.
it. Yes,
So there'd be no segregated facilities,
so
everybody being there together
that's correct.
under Herbert Truman.
Yes, President Harry Truman.
That man was an interesting president.
Very,
I mean, for real.
to say the least.
Harry Truman, boy, could we use a Harry Truman today. He
Yeah,
was a no nonsense kind of a guy,
yes, he was.
and he got it done.
Yes, he did.
That's an impressive thing. So these men went through segregated training, and then where were they assigned, or were they going to be a part of the fighting team of the Marines, or how did this happen when they finished their basic training?
Well, upon finishing their basic training, the first black Marine fighting unit became the 51st Defense Battalion, where they trained on heavy anti-aircraft weapons, the 40 millimeter, the 90 millimeter anti-aircraft weapon. And in training, the Montford Point Marines broke every gunnery record in the history of the United States Marine Corps. They could outshoot
Oh
anybody.
my goodness. They could outshoot
Yes,
their white counterparts.
yes, ma'am. They broke every gunnery record in the history of the Marine Corps.
That is powerful information.
Yes.
Was their equipment up to par? Because if they're
Yeah.
willing to drop them into,
No.
bad terrain, I'm wondering, was their artillery up to par for a war?
Oh, yes, yes. Well, once in wartime, after they were deployed to the Pacific War Theater, training was over.
Whew.
They were in fact at war, and they were, assigned to protect the Pacific Islands. From Okinawa all the way, to Guam, the Ellis Islands and Guam. Yeah, absolutely.
So were they fighting alongside of the white Marines?
Well, white Marines, at times didn't have a choice. They didn't want to. They wanted to remain segregated, but that fades away real quick.
When you in fighting and you in war,
Absolutely.
I just seemed intuitively you cannot be talking about discrimination when you're being shot at by the enemy. Am I right?
That's correct. In fact, they were in the first waves on Saipan on D-Day. It's
Oh,
Saipan.
my words.
Yeah,
They were in the first waves.
absolutely. On the siege of Saipan, they were also on Iwo Jima. They were also on one of the most fierce battles on the island of Peleliu, one of the most bloodiest battles in Marine Corps history. And the Montford Point Marines were tasked with going to the front and extracting injured and wounded white Marines. They carried stretchers out. They assaulted the Japanese with a machine gun in one hand and carried stretchers on the other hand.
Whoo wee.
One corner of the stretcher with the other hand. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
and bought those men out, and that's where they became dubbed as the Black Angels of Peleliu.
The Black Angels of
Of
Peleliu.
Peleliu. And that's when
Ooh.
many white Marines began to recant and say, those Marines are some of the finest to ever wear the Eagle Globe and Anchor. But of
That,
course, that wasn't new to us because Black men had performed on the fierce battlefields of this nation, every police action, every war prior to that time, and up until now. And they've always had a reputation for being fierce warriors.
well, that's a historical fact. Going back to
Yeah.
Africa, going
Mm-hmm.
back to, we come out of the literally
Right.
the history of warriors in Africa.
Right.
That's in the DNA. That is, we
Mm-hmm.
warred valiantly. So they literally, did they turn? Because the Pacific was really, and I'm just saying, I'm a war historian. I follow wars, particularly World War II, because the equipment and the gunnery was impressive. I mean, it was, and
Absolutely.
these men fought neck to neck, side by side, with their white peers.
Yep. Many of the Marines were assigned to ammunition depot companies, okay, where they delivered ammunition to the white Marines on the front lines. And of course, the gray area of fighting versus not fighting disappeared very quickly. They
Oh,
had to pick
yeah,
their own weapons. If they were providing weapons, they had access to weapons and they used them.
which they should, because they're fighting men. So, was this Pacific situation? My dad was in the Navy during World War II, and he fought valiantly in the Navy. He received Purple Medal and all the above.
Purple
But
Heart.
yeah, Purple Heart. But he said that the Japanese were brutal. He said they didn't back down on anything, and you were going to fight them. It was not any kind of sit down and let's have tea. It was going to be a fight to the finish.
Mm-hmm.
And is that pretty much what you've heard as well about the Pacific?
Oh, the Japanese were a formidable foe.
Yep, that's what I was told.
Yep. They
They
were
did.
very, very stealthy, they were elusive, um, and they were mighty in battle. To defeat them really catapulted us into the finest fighting force in the world.
Whew, my goodness gracious. Were the casualties high among the Montford Point Marines, as you know?
Well, anytime you have an elite group of individuals in war, the casualties would appear high. But for the percentage that they made up of the Marine Corps, it really wasn't as, you know, cut and dry. It wasn't
Okay.
really a lot of casualties. Yeah,
Were they many of
but
them,
there were many casualties.
and they were young men, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
That's what struck me with this whole D-Day in Europe.
Mhm.
I saw the pictures. They look like children. They look like teenagers.
Yeah,
And I said, we sent our youth to die.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. The average young Marine is about 23, 24, 25 years old,
a baby,
virtually. When I was on the
virtually.
Marine Corps, I was on the front lines at age 21.
21,
I was a
Commandant.
fully decorated combat veteran at the age of 21.
Then I know you've seen a lot.
Yes,
And I
come
know
up close and personal.
close and personal.
Yes, ma'am.
So it is with that perspective that you are at the helm of this amazing organization. I
It's an
salute
honor
them.
and a
I
privilege.
salute them. I salute you. I salute the bravery and the integrity and the character of these black men.
Yes,
I salute that. So
yes.
tell me, since you have been at the helm, What have been some of the things that you think have set your legacy apart from others?
Well, I don't like to think of it as my legacy. The
Okay,
legacy that I have and identify with is the legacy left by those first Black United States Marines that preceded me in my time in the military, because it is upon their shoulders that we stand.
that is correct.
They opened the doors for us, and that will ever be our legacy.
So when they came back from war, because one of
Mm-hmm.
the reasons we got involved with each other um, on the military side is because many of these men did not get their rightfully earned GI benefits.
Well, they didn't get a lot of things that they rightfully
Oh,
deserved,
oh my
even
God.
on, even on the battlefield. They were denied promotions in rank. They were denied meritorious ribbons and medals and awards.
Right.
They were not allowed to participate in the ticker tape parade in New York City after the war.
They were not allowed to participate in the ticker tape. May I ask why?
Well, it's a nasty word that starts with R.
Racism.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, Commander,
America's little dirty secret.
I remain absolutely beyond annoyed because the politics and the economic impact were so significant.
Mm-hmm.
The GI Bill was a key to housing and education.
That's right. And
And
imagine what they would have been able to do for their
oh,
families.
this is all I'm thinking about. I think about my dad, who was not a Marine, but he did not have the benefit of the GI Bill nor the housing, and he became self-educated and college educated. He did that on his own, and I'm sure these men did as well. But when we look at where we are headed, I think it's just so important that we acknowledge them. That's all I wanted. I said they must be told thank you. And thank you again and again and again for forfeiting what could have been a wonderful situation if they were white. But because they fought valiantly as Black Marines, they didn't get the benefits. And that to me is absolutely appalling. So as we move forward, and you've dealt with many of these men, how did they manage? What did they do when they came back home? I dare ask the question, but I have to.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, many of them, of course, uh, some some of them had migrated north, as their predecessors did in the 1920s, got jobs in the automotive industry, which after World War II reverted back to making automobiles.
Okay. And that's
And
the
it
Detroit piece.
well, that's pretty much, yeah. Well, Detroit, such as the nation.
Right, that is
Yeah.
true. We're a motor
Detroit is
country.
the automotive center of the world. It's where all the military machinery was manufactured initially.
In Detroit.
In Detroit.
I didn't know that.
Detroit is known as was dubbed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt as the arsenal of democracy.
Detroit.
Detroit.
Was that because of the automobile industry and the fact that they had the manufacturing capacity?
Yep. Well, headquarters was here.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
And yeah, the entire military complex was exercised here in the city of Detroit, where automotive plants were converted into making wartime machinery for the war.
That
Absolutely. That was
that
all in Detroit.
that is a extraordinary history for a city.
It is.
I think so.
It is.
I mean, everything was there, the manufacturing capacity, I guess the parts. Then they had labor. The labor would have been the women because
We
their
made
husbands.
tanks. We made tanks. And that's where the Rosie the Riveters were.
Oh,
We
wow.
made airplanes. So a lot of the wartime machinery was made right here in
In
the
Detroit.
factories of Detroit, Michigan.
Whoo-wee. The Motor City,
Yes,
for
we had
real.
a greater reputation for the military than any other place in the United States.
And I'm assuming that because of labor demand post-war, that many African descent soldiers found their home in Detroit.
Well, that's correct. That's correct.
Were they automatically given fairness in the hiring process?
Well, there was struggle, but for the most part, yes, they were able to make good wages, and many of them helped build the middle class, as a matter of fact.
Well, in fact, I will be candid with you. Many of my relatives migrated after the war from Kentucky and jumped Cincinnati, jumped Dayton, jumped Toledo, and went straight to Detroit, where they were able to own homes
Yeah,
and have employment. Now, mind you, the homes were all in black neighborhoods because of, again, the problem with house
redlining, yes,
redlining.
housing discrimination. In fact, in 1943, during the war, mind you, there was a riot, a race riot, right here in the city of Detroit.
Oh my goodness.
It happened exactly. hmm And
Because
blacks
of
were trying to get into homes. Whites felt that blacks were, getting in the homes, that they wanted. So there was you know, a big race riot because of that.
in
Absolutely.
Detroit,
hmm
wrong city. Strategically
Did not
wrong.
want blacks living, across 8 Mile,
Right, right.
and built a wall.
And built a wall
Yes.
on 8 Mile in Detroit.
That wall is still there.
The wall is still there.
hmm
Well, Dag, if we can tear down the Berlin Wall, that wall needs to come down.
Well, it's just there as a relic now. It's not what it was.
Oh, I was going to say, come
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
Commandant. That is absolutely insulting, period. Insulting. So, moving forward, you've given me a good understanding, at least, of the history of the Montford Point Marines. And why do you think people don't know about them? Is this something that is just lack of information, lack of media? What is it?
Well, you have to remember that the entire, structure and fabric of society and what it was in that day was around, discrimination and segregation, Jim Crow laws for many, many years. And they suppressed that information. They suppressed that history for many, many years. And so the history of these Black Marines remained in obscurity until recent years. And which is, a matter of fact, the reason why I became a part of this organization, because I wanted to be the individual, the catalyst in
Yes.
telling their story and
Oh,
making
it's a
sure that
story.
their
It's a
story.
story that has to be
So,
told.
absolutely. And in
I mean,
Detroit, the Montford Point Marines are well known.
they are. Well, we want to change that descriptive and make this a national conversation. And
Absolutely.
if I can use this vehicle to do that, the power of money, I'm going to do it because that is so very, very important. And I believe so strongly, as you know, in the military. I mean, I just do. I believe in the military before I believe a politician. And all the above. I feel that these men and women have given their lives so valiantly. So let's
Hmm.
move forward and talk about this event you're doing coming up.
Well, uh,
Yes.
I tell you, I am just so delighted and excited that we have uh, the 14th Annual National Heritage Military Banquet and Awards Ceremony coming up on this 23rd of June, which is just about 2 weeks.
I think so. Let me ask, can you all put that announcement on screen? Ben, can you all do that so we could see that announcement? Are you able to bring that up? And I guess they're trying to find it in the
Hmm.
camcorder. So
Yes.
this event is a 14th annual. So you've been doing this for 14 years.
Yes. Well, we've been doing the banquets for 14 years.
Okay, there it is. It's come up.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
And
And
of course, we were hindered somewhat for several years because of the pandemic.
okay, thank you, Ben.
So there were several years that we have not had a banquet.
Okay.
And we stopped at 13. And then a couple of years later, between then and now, we finally, gone to the 14th.
So
But
what distinguishes this event from prior?
well, I think it's going to be more, it's kind of like fine wine. It ferments when it sits for a while,
Yes.
and it it has become more potent now. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, everything. The entire social construct of what it is to, uh, be a part of this organization and telling the story of the men who went before us, and
Yes.
you know, being in a position to tell their story. In fact, they became national heroes in 2012 when President Barack Obama and the 112th United States Congress awarded them the Congressional Gold Medal. They quickly became a household name nationwide. Every
My
news,
goodness.
every major news station, every newspaper, all the media, they were blasted across this country for
That
several days.
is extraordinary.
Yes.
And
And
what was the verbiage because of their outstanding service, or how did the wording read for that honor?
well, the Congressional Gold Medal is, awarded to those who have uh, performed a, a feat or an event that will eventually outlive them in their lifetime.
Correct. Hold on.
They were so significant uh, in history and their contributions to the social fabric of the United States, uh, yeah, that they will be remembered.
Ben, can I see that gold medal? Can you put that on the screen, please? There it is. Yes.
It is the highest civilian honor that
The
can be awarded
highest civilian
after
honor.
war. Yeah. Hmm. And it was
That's
because of their excellence and perseverance from 1942 to 1949. And there are many achievements and exploits between those years and what they have contributed to the United States Marine Corps.
powerful. So, fast forward, they then President Barack Obama and the 112th Congress did this acknowledgement. So, was everybody identified to receive this medal, or were there people that were not identified at that time?
Well, there were people that were not identified at that time.
Okay,
And of course, there were only 579 uh, that were able to be found for the date of that ceremony out of the 20,000.
oh my gosh,
And
yes.
I mean, there was, almost 70 years. I mean, between
Mm-hmm.
then and the time the medal was awarded.
Right.
Yeah, you know,
But you all are still, this event coming up on the 23rd of June. Will
Yeah,
it be acknowledging more men and for this medal?
yeah. It has been our purpose to continue the mission of searching and looking for World War II Montford Point Marines, and we have awarded many, many medals since since 2000, the year of 2012,
Right.
Black Marines from all over the United States. Yeah, so we continued that search, and in fact, this year we will be, as we have done in previous years, but this year we will be awarding 5 Congressional Gold medals posthumously to the families of veterans who did not make the ceremony, were disabled. Some were even in hospice that were not able to make the ceremony. Now, mind you, there were Marines on that day in 2012 on a sunny hot day who had checked themselves out of hospice to be present for that ceremony.
Oh my goodness.
Yes,
That is
in
so.
almost 100-degree weather.
Was that in Washington, D.C.?
Washington, D.C., United States Capitol,
Who
and
we
at the 8th and I.
that
Marine Corps,
had
the
to
8th
have
and I.
been. Now, did the president himself put the medal on them, or did they receive it in a box? How did that ceremony go?
The Commandant of the United States Marine Corps, my friend and confidant, General James F. Amos,
Yes.
who is a friend of both myself and United States Ambassador Theodore Britton, did the honors.
He
And
did.
other flag officers, who were themselves generals and ranking uh, uh, officers, draped the medals over the necks personally for each of those 579
Ooh.
Black Marines.
I would have been moved to tears.
You would have been.
I know I would have been. I
Yeah.
would have been moved to tears because late is certainly better than never. So with these 5, I think it's 6, or is it 5 going in this?
Yeah, it's 5.
Okay, that are coming in. I do know that one of those being honored is a native of Cincinnati, Ohio. He is not,
Yes.
yeah, he is not here amongst us, but his family will be representing him and his legacy at that event. James Roger
Roger
Williams.
Williams.
Yes, yes, an
We're
amazing man.
looking forward to receiving him on the 23rd of July.
Oh, I am so, and I plan on being there.
My
I,
goodness.
I'm going
I
to be
think his
there for
entire
that.
family is going to be
I
here from
think
Cincinnati.
and you know what? They should. They should, because this is a story that should be told. And it passes on generationally. Their children and their grandchildren and great grandchildren need to know about this man and about
And
the organization.
and they will. There are books, about the Montford Point Marines. There are also documentaries about the Montford Point Marines.
And is that
So,
at your headquarters? How can people get more information?
yeah, well, that information, if you want a copy of the books, I do a book listing. And I can send that information out to anyone who wants books. I can send out a book list of documentaries and videos. I'd be
That
glad.
is so needed. I'm serious, Commandant.
Hmm.
This
Yeah.
is this is this is major. This is major, and it's not to discredit the experiences of other African American military men and women, but I
Certainly,
think that the story of the Montford Point Marines is a compelling story. It
certainly
is.
is.
It's just
Certainly
a
is.
compelling story. I'm sure that, have you all chronicled some of their experiences? Have you been able to
Oh,
get that on tape?
oh, yes, ma'am. I have for many years. In fact, I myself have began book manuscript that will be converted into a movie.
Good,
And I might just go directly to the movie.
good, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that because that is the path I would have suggested, that this needs to become a movie
Yeah,
so that
and
people.
also I might say that they were interviewed by the United States Pentagon, and they're on record. Their recordings,
Yes,
their interviews are with the Smithsonian.
are they? So they're
Library of,
archived
yeah,
in perpetuity
yeah,
as a permanent record of what they've done.
yeah.
I think that is so, that's just so great. It really is. And for those who feel, and I've had this said to me, why are you trying to dig that up? And it is like, it's not a digging up anything, it's a recognition of what happened historically and the contributions that were made. It is so important that these men be recognized and acknowledged for what they did, acts of bravery, acts of valor,
Absolutely.
just powerful, powerful things. So at this event coming up on June the 23rd, and where do people need to call? How do they find out about this?
Well, they can visit our website at www.montfordpointmarinesamerica.org.
Okay.
We're also on Facebook at Montford Point Marines, Montford Point Marines Detroit.
Okay.
Yes.
So they do have venue if
Yes, we're on
they,
social media. Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
great. And
And
at
of
this,
course, you can also surf the internet for anything about the Montford Point Marines in the history.
you're right. You're absolutely right. So the keynote speaker, because we're wrapping up, we've run out of time. Your keynote speaker for this event is who?
Marine Corps Major General Cornell A. Wilson Jr. from South Carolina.
South Carolina. My. It's a lot of military guys come out of those Carolinas.
Oh, yes, the
Yeah.
Carolina, that's where it all happens.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. I think that's wonderful. Well, I will say to you this in conclusion of this interview, and I think for those of you that are watching, you would have to agree with me that this is an amazing organization, and what under the leadership and the vision of Commandant Robert Bernard Middleton II, who is a Daytonian. You're from Dayton originally?
That's right.
I mean, that's something. May I encourage all of you to learn more about the organization, to participate if you can, and if not, be respectful and know that people died for the right for you to experience freedom. It should not be dismissed because it cost our men a lot. And therefore, I salute you all. Can I do this? Thank you very much. And I appreciate your service and what your organization is doing. I look forward to seeing you all at the event. And thank you so much for your time today, Commandant. May God's peace
God bless you.
bless you. May God bless you and continue to bless you and your family. And for those of you that are listening in on today's Power of Money, I just concluded my interview with Commandant Robert Bernard Middleton II, who is president of the Montford Point Marines, headquartered in Detroit, Motor City, Michigan. God bless you all, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.